Well, good morning, everybody. One of my favorite periodicals, annual periodicals, is the Darwin Awards. Now, you might not have heard of those, and if you haven't, I personally think you should go check them out. They're hilarious. The subtitle for this prestigious set of awards is Chlorinating the Gene Pool, commemorating those who improve our gene pool by removing themselves from it. It probably gives you an idea of what they are. Basically, they're the somewhat morbid, though usually pretty amusing stories from the previous years of how people brought their lives and brought about their own deaths in very unintelligent and ridiculous ways. And when I read chapter 5 of Exodus, I can't help but think of one of those stories that happened long before you guys were born in the 1999 Darwin Awards. It's a story about a lawyer and two of his friends who go on a fishing trip. And it reads like this. A lawyer and two of his buddies were on a fishing trip in Caddo Lake, Texas. A lightning storm hit the lake, and most of the fishermen immediately headed for the shore. But not our friend the lawyer. He was alone on the rear of his aluminum bass boat, and his buddies were in the front. This gentleman stood up, spread his arms wide, crucifixion style, and shouted, "Here I am, Lord, show yourself to me!" Needless to say, God delivered, and the other two passengers on the boat survived the lightning strike and are reported to have become ministers immediately. As ridiculous as this lawyer was to stand up in the middle of a lake in the middle of a lightning storm, this is essentially what Pharaoh does in chapter 5. Like the lawyer, he thinks that God is no threat to him, so he challenges God, declaring war on God. And the plagues of chapters 7 to 11 are God's response. Listen to a few verses from the beginning of chapter 7. And the Lord said to Moses, "See, I have made you like God to Pharaoh, and your brother shall be your prophet. You shall speak all that I command you, and your brother Aaron shall tell Pharaoh to let the people of Israel go out of this land." And then skipping to verse 5. "The Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord when I stretch out my hand against Egypt and bring out the people of Israel from among them." So essentially, God's answer to Pharaoh's questions is showing him how he is sovereign over the whole universe and all that exists through these plagues, answering Pharaoh's challenge against God. In fact, God's sovereignty is shown more clearly in this passage than almost anywhere else in the rest of Scripture. The plagues show us that God is sovereign over all creation, and by doing so, God destroys the Egyptian worldview and he destroys their religious belief system. Now remember, a worldview, like we talked about back when we were having youth group together, a worldview is a set of beliefs that we have about the universe that help us to understand and interpret all that is going on around us. It's like a picture that represents reality. Well, the Egyptians' picture of reality is not at all true, and it's about to be destroyed and shattered by God's plagues. You see, the Egyptians were a very religious people that had a very highly spiritual view of the universe around them. At the center of their religious worldview was this concept of ma'at, which means balance in ancient Egyptian. It's the idea that in the universe there is an essential balance and that we can see it through the order and stability of the universe. But behind ma'at were the Egyptian gods, whom they believed controlled the different parts of the universe in order to maintain this balance. Now, at the top of their group of gods was Amun-Ra, god of the sun, and Horus, god of the sky. They were the most powerful. They held supreme power. Pharaoh was believed to be an incarnation of those two gods, Amun-Ra and Horus. So that made Pharaoh the physical display, the very center and core of Ma'at, the balance, the ordered universe, as well as the center of the Egyptian worldview. So that, in a nutshell, is their religious belief system and the context and the worldview into which God releases the plagues. You see, the plagues weren't just terrible events that brought about great suffering and judgment on the Egyptians. They weren't just God strong-arming Pharaoh to get him to let the people go. They were really a spiritual spear thrust into the heart of Egyptian religious belief and worldview, destroying Ma'at. And by doing so, God defeats Pharaoh. He crushes how he viewed himself and how everybody else viewed him, because he couldn't do anything to stop the plagues. God shows himself sovereign over all of creation and all the Egyptian gods, and shows Pharaoh and all the gods to be essentially powerless at best, but really nothing at all. So we'll start looking at those plagues on Monday. In the meantime, remember that this is the God that we worship. He is truly in control of all that happens in the universe. You guys think about that, and I'll see you Monday.